Hello, general 8th grade and 7th grade advanced math students. This is lesson 4.3 and 4.4. You're going to need your notebook out and pencil and a ruler and a couple sheets of graph paper. So if you don't have all that, pause the video and get it. We're going to start with lesson 4.3, which is proportional relationships. So label the next blank page in your notebook as lesson 4.3, proportional relationships. So you don't have to write this part down. You did this last year when we worked on proportions, but you've got 1 over 2's compared to 6 over what? So we did 1 times 6 is 6, so 2 times 6 is 12. Same thing here. What did we do to the 6 to get 2? We divided by 3, so 18 divided by 3, x would be 6. We did proportions. You don't need to worry about this page. You are going to need to pause the video, and I want you to put this page in your notes. We're not going to worry about direct variation. This is what the lesson is called, proportional relationships. So pause the video and get this into your notebooks, the words, the graph, and the picture. Now that you have that in your notebooks, we're going to see what it looks like. And on a graph, it looks exactly like what this is. It's got to be a straight line, and it's got to cross through the origin, or 0, 0. So if we look down here, we're looking for a straight line, and we're looking for it to go through the origin at 0, 0. So letter A, is this proportional? Yes, because it's a straight line and it goes through the origin. Letter B does not go through the origin, so it's not. C is a no. D is a yes, it goes through the origin. Not only do you have to know what a proportional relationship looks like on a graph, you know what it looks like on a table. We're going to need to find the change in y over change in x, the slope, and we have to make sure it's consistent, but then we also have to make sure that it goes through the origin. It can't just be one, it has to be both. So we're going to look at our x's. This one goes up, yes, this is consistent by 1. But look at our y's. This goes up by 110. This goes up by 125. This is definitely not proportional because the y does not go up consistently. Let's take a look at f. This one goes up by half, so that's consistent. This one goes up by 1, so that's consistent. So we have the change in y over change in x. Let's go backwards to see that it goes through 0, 0. So we'd go 4, 3, 2, 1, go back one more, we would get to 0. Subtract half each time, 2, 1.5, 1, half. This would also be at 0. So yes, this would be proportional. We're also going to have to be able to tell if it's proportional in a situation. So this is a short lesson just because we're going to be going through this while we're doing other lessons and talking about whether or not it's proportional or not. So if you don't completely understand, it's not that big of a deal. We're going to be going through examples. So let's move on to lesson 4.4, which is slope-intercept form. So go to the next blank page in your notebook and label it lesson 4.4, slope-intercept form. You're going to do an activity by yourself first. You know how to do this page. If I gave you the x's, you could fill in your y's, and then you would be able to graph it. Okay, same thing here. You'd plug in your x's, get your y's, and then you would be able to graph it. Don't need to worry about this page. So, knowing you know how to do it, we're going to start with this page right here. And you may need to make it a little bit bigger. We'll see if I can do it. There we go. You're going to do 3 things. First, you're going to graph it. You're going to pick 4 x's and plug in your y's. and make a table, or make a graph, I'm sorry. So -1/2 x plus 1. So I'm going to pick 2's because it's half. So -1/2 of -2 is a +1, plus 1 is 2. -1/2 of 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. -1/2 of 2 is a -1, plus 1 is 0. And you kind of see in 2, 1, 0, this would be a -1. So then on your graph paper, and I'm going to do an ugly graph over here, you're going to graph it. So I got -2, +2, 0, 1, 2, 0, and 4, -1. So it's going to look something like that on your graph. You, of course, is going to do it on graph paper and make it look much nicer. Then I want you to find the slope, which again, remember, is rise over run. So I'm going to go from this point to this point. So I went up 1 and over backwards 2. So that's a -1/2. Then I want to know where it crosses the y-axis. So this is the y-axis, and it crossed at 1. So you could write 0, 1, or you could just write 1. I don't care which. 0 is technically always the x, so if you just want to write the 1, you can, but it's totally up to you. So, really quickly, first thing you do is graph it, which is what I did in red. In blue then, I found the slope of each one, rise over run. And then in green, I found where it crossed the y-axis. Complete this, and then we will come back, and you can pause the video and then come back and we'll talk about it. Okay, so I'm going to quick fill this all in. I don't have the answers in here set up already, but I do know the answers. So here is all of the answers for slope, and here are all the answers for where it crossed the y-axis. So that's what your table should look like. Hopefully you have that on your iPad. So let's look at the questions down below and see if we notice anything. So letter K, do you notice a relationship between the slope of the graph and its equation? So I want you to look at the slope, so this column here, and I want you to look at the equations. Then I want you to look between the point of intersection with the y-axis and its equation. So this column here with the equations. What you should have noticed is that in an equation, y equals 1/2 x plus 1, the slope, which we did in blue up there, is the number right in front of the x. And if there is no number, if it's just x plus 2, then we put a 1 in front of the x, and that is our slope. If we have a negative x, then again, we put the 1 in front, and our slope is -1. That's where the slope is. You don't have to find rise over run. You don't have to graph it. Slope is already in the equation. Then they asked about this y-intercept. The y-intercept, if you look in the equation, is whatever we are adding or subtracting to our x. So, slope is right before the x, and what we call our y-intercept, we're going to get to that in a minute, is what we add or subtract after it. We're not going to do this one right now. We're going to come back to it. This page, whoops. Oh, make it go. This page, I want you to put in your notes. Pause the video and get all of this into your notes, please. Slope-intercept form is important, and the y-intercept is important. You also need to know this. This part down here is very, very important. So pause the video and get all of this into your I am going to be asking you pretty much on a daily basis what is slope-intercept form, and I should be able to have all of you say y equals mx plus b. I'm going to be asking in class, I've asked you that. You should know it. You also need to know what the m stands for, which is always slope. I don't know why it's not an s, it's an m, but it's always slope. And our y-intercept is always the b. So I'm going to be able to ask you those. This is a huge concept. You have to know these. Now looking at our equations, we should be able to tell what is the slope, what is the y-intercept. So number one, y equals 3x minus 7. 3 is our slope, and we're actually going to say it's 3 over 1. And negative 7 is our y-intercept. For number 2, it's not quite in slope-intercept form, so we have to change it, and we did this back in Unit 1. We're going to add 1 to both sides, so y equals a negative 2/3 x plus 1. Now we know what our slope is, and we know what our y-intercept is. So now that we have that information, we're going to be able to graph it. So we have our equation, y equals negative 3x plus 3. We know that our y-intercept is 3, positive 3, and we know that our slope is negative 3, and I'm going to put it over 1. So the first thing we're going to put on the graph is our y-intercept. We're on the y-axis, and we're going to put a dot on 3. Now, our slope is negative 3 over 1, which means we're going to go down 3 because it's a negative. That's our rise up and down. And then our run, so it's a positive 1, we're going to go to the right one. So we're going to start at our y-intercept. We're going to go down 3 to the right 1 and put a dot. Down 3 to the right 1, put a dot. Down 3 to the right 1, put a dot. And then, of course, you're going to draw a line all the way through, and you're going to do a much better job than I did. Let's try another one. This is a situation. You're taking a taxi, and here's our equation. Y equals 2.5x plus 2. But I do not want slope in decimal. I want it in like a ratio or a fraction. So 2.5 is the same as 2.5, which is 5 over 2. So y equals 5 over 2x plus 2. 2 being our y-intercept, which is the first thing we put on our graph. So it's a positive 2. And then our slope is 5 over 2, which means we're going to go up 5 and to the right 2. So we're going to start at our y-intercept, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2. Now, if I want to go the other way, instead of a positive 5, it would be a negative 5. Instead of a positive 2, it would be a negative 2, which means I would go down 5 and then left 2. So again, starting at my y-intercept, down 5 to the left 2, and there's my other point, and then I can draw a line. And again, you're going to draw it much better than I did. So you've got to be able to do a couple of things. You've got to be able to tell what the slope is, what the y-intercept is, and then you should be able to graph it. And you're going to be able to tell me what the y-intercept and the slope is here. And if they did the taxi, our y-intercept is where they started. That's always our starting point. So starting 0 miles, that's how much they're charging us. And our slope is how much they're charging per mile. So you should be able to explain what that is. If your equation, so like the exit ticket here, if the equation y minus 4 equals 2x is not in slope-intercept form, you've got to change it. I'm going to add 4 to both sides, y equals, and I'm going to put 2x plus 4 so that it's in slope-intercept form, and then I'll be able to graph it. Your homework is in Schoology. You're going to go to the 4.4 exercises in Schoology, and you are going to do it on paper. And it is due in the next class. If you have questions, feel free to message me or talk to me when you return. Thank you.